200,000 years had passed since the survivors of Earth made their choice. In that time, humanity had grown from 12,000 refugees to a civilization of 50 billion. People spread across 100 star systems. They had built cities and factories, universities, and research stations. They had developed technologies that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors, and they had done all of it in secret. The Valdrix Dominion ruled 40,000 star systems, but even an empire that large could not watch everything. There were gaps in their sensor networks, blind spots in their patrol routes, regions of space they considered too empty or too distant to bother monitoring. Humanity had found those gaps and built their civilization inside them. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Inheritance, the flagship of the human defense fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm brown eyes, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. His family had served in the fleet for 10,000 generations, going all the way back to the original Marcus Cole, who had helped found Remembrance. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of human space. 3,000 warships were stationed at strategic points throughout their territory, ready to move at a moment's notice. Each ship was crewed by men and women who had trained their entire lives for the battle that was coming. "Status report," Nathan said. Captain Amy Turner stepped forward. She was his second in command, a woman in her early 40s with short, dark hair and sharp eyes. She had earned her position through skill and dedication, rising through the ranks faster than anyone in recent memory. "All fleet elements are in position," she reported. "Our deep cover operatives have confirmed that the Valdrix remain unaware of our existence. Their patrol patterns are unchanged. Their defensive networks show no signs of increased alertness." Nathan nodded slowly. For 200,000 years, humanity had been watching the Valdrix. They had sent spies to infiltrate their worlds, captured their ships to study their technology, and mapped every detail of their empire. The Valdrix thought they ruled the galaxy unopposed. They had no idea that a patient predator had been stalking them all along. "What about the slave races?" Nathan asked. Amy pulled up another display. The Valdrix had conquered hundreds of species over the millions of years of their rule. Some had been destroyed entirely, but many had been kept alive to serve as workers, soldiers, and entertainment. They lived under brutal conditions, treated as property rather than people. "Our contacts among the Rethki and the Javarn are ready to act when we give the signal," Amy said. "The Valdrix have grown complacent. They believe their slave races are too broken to resist. They are wrong." Nathan studied the display for a long moment. This was the culmination of everything his people had worked toward. Countless generations had lived and died carrying the weight of memory, preparing for a day they would never see. Now that day had finally arrived, and the responsibility of making it count fell on his shoulders. "Tell me about the planet killers," he said. Amy's expression darkened. The planet killers were the weapons the Valdrix had used to destroy Earth. They were ancient and terrible, capable of cracking a world open in a matter of hours. The Valdrix kept them in heavily guarded installations throughout their empire, ready to be deployed against any species that dared to resist. "We have identified the locations of all major planet killer facilities," Amy said. "Our first strike will target them simultaneously. By the time the Valdrix realize they are under attack, their most dangerous weapons will already be destroyed." Nathan walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a region of space that had once been home to a small blue planet, there was nothing but empty void. The Valdrix had erased Earth so completely that not even debris remained. 8 billion people, reduced to atoms. "My ancestor was there when the survivors made their choice," Nathan said quietly. Lisa Grant asked them whether they wanted to forget or remember. They chose to remember. Every generation since then has carried that memory, passed it down like a sacred trust. He turned back to face his crew. The bridge was staffed by dozens of officers, each one descended from the original colonists, each one raised on stories of Earth and trained for this moment. In a few hours, we will begin the largest military operation in human history. We will attack an empire that has ruled for 5 million years, that has destroyed countless civilizations, that has never known defeat. They think they are invincible. They think the galaxy belongs to them by right. Nathan's voice grew harder. They are wrong. They have always been wrong. And we are going to prove it. He gave the order, and the fleet began to move. Across human space, ships that had been hidden for decades emerged from their concealment. They formed into battle groups and set course for predetermined targets. Communication systems that had been silent for years came alive with encrypted transmissions, coordinating the largest military operation the galaxy had ever seen. On Valdrix Prime, the homeworld of the Dominion, High Sovereign Kethvon sat in his throne room, unaware that his empire was about to crumble. He was the 300th ruler of his line, born to power and raised to believe that the Valdrix were the superior species in the universe. He had never faced a serious challenge to that belief. A minor functionary approached his throne with a report. "Your Excellency, there have been some anomalies in the outer territories. Communication delays, missing patrol ships. Nothing significant, but the patterns are unusual." Kethvarn waved a dismissive hand. "Send investigators. It is probably slave raiders or malcontents among the subject races. Nothing that concerns me." He returned to his meal, confident that the universe was exactly as it should be. The Valdrix had ruled for 5 million years. What could possibly threaten them now? In the darkness between stars, 3,000 human warships moved toward their targets. They were carrying weapons that the Valdrix had never seen, developed in secret laboratories over thousands of generations. They were crewed by soldiers who had trained since childhood for this moment, who knew the history of their people and understood exactly what was at stake. Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the inheritance, watching the countdown timer tick toward 0. In his pocket, he carried a small stone that had been passed down through his family since the founding of Remembrance. It was from Earth, one of the last pieces of the homeworld that still existed. "This is for everyone we lost," he said softly. "This is for 8 billion people who never got to see the stars. This is for every generation that carried the memory and kept the faith." The timer reached 0. Across the galaxy, the attack began. The Valdrix had made their choice 500,000 years ago when they destroyed a small blue world. Now humanity was coming to deliver the consequences of that choice. The hunters had become the hunted, and the reckoning was finally at hand. The Valdrix warship hung in orbit above the small blue planet called Earth. Commander Zethkor looked down at the world with cold, calculating eyes. His species had ruled the galaxy for 5 million years. They had destroyed hundreds of civilizations and enslaved thousands more. To them, this was just another day. The creatures below have begun launching ships beyond their own star system, his science officer reported. They call themselves humans. At their current rate of development, they will achieve true interstellar travel within 50 years. Zethkor made a sound of disgust. Another species reaching for the stars. How tiresome. He turned to his weapons officer. "Activate the planet killers. We will cleanse this world before they become a nuisance." The weapons officer hesitated for just a moment. "Commander, our scans show nearly 8 billion life forms on the surface. They have cities, art, music. They have children. And in 1,000 years, they might have warships," Zethkor replied. "It is easier to crush an insect before it grows wings. Fire." The planet killers were ancient weapons, designed to crack worlds open like eggs. They had been used 1,000 times before on 1,000 different species. The Valdrix did not believe in fair fights. They believed in survival, and survival meant eliminating any potential threat before it could grow. Earth died in fire. The oceans boiled away. The atmosphere burned. 8 billion humans, along with every other living thing on the planet, ceased to exist in a matter of hours. The Valdrix recorded the event in their archives, labeled the system as cleansed, and moved on to their next target. They did not know that 3 years before their arrival, a colony ship called the Wanderer's Hope had launched toward a distant star. 12,000 humans slept in cryogenic chambers, dreaming of a new home among the stars. They had no idea that everything they had ever known was already gone. Lisa Grant was the first to wake when the ship reached its destination. She was 34 years old, a former naval commander with steady hands and a calm mind. The ship's computer, an artificial intelligence named Guardian, had revived her because it needed a human to make an important decision. "Commander Grant," Guardian said as Lisa opened her eyes, "I must inform you of a situation." Lisa sat up slowly, her muscles stiff from 200 years of sleep. "What kind of situation?" "Earth has been destroyed. I intercepted Valdrix military transmissions confirming the event. The planet was reduced to molten rock approximately 3 years after our departure. There were no survivors." Lisa stared at the screen in front of her. Guardian was showing her the transmission data, the coordinates, the cold official language of the Valdrix report. "A minor species," the report said. "Eliminated before achieving significance. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply sat there, feeling the weight of 8 billion deaths pressing down on her shoulders. Her parents were gone. Her sister and her 2 nephews were gone. Every friend she had ever made, every place she had ever visited, every memory she had of home now existed only in her mind. "Wake the others," she said finally. "The Leadership Council. We need to talk." There were 5 of them in total. Daniel Perry was the chief engineer, a quiet man with clever hands who could fix anything. Karen White was the medical officer, a woman with kind eyes who had dedicated her life to healing. Samuel Brooks ran the agricultural section and knew everything about growing food on alien worlds. Marcus Cole was the security chief, a former soldier with broad shoulders and a fierce protective instinct. They gathered in the observation deck, looking out at the strange new star that would now be their sun. Guardian had found them a good world, green and blue like Earth had been, orbiting at just the right distance to support human life. "We have a choice to make," Lisa told them. "We can settle this world, build new lives, and try to forget what was done to us. We can let our children grow up without the burden of the past. In time, humanity might become something new, something that has moved beyond revenge." She paused, looking at each of them in turn. "Or we can remember. We can make sure that every generation knows what happened to Earth. We can grow strong in secret, hidden from the Valdrix and their empire. And one day, when we are ready, we can make them answer for what they did." Daniel spoke first. "They killed everyone. My wife was pregnant when we left. She stayed behind because she wanted our child to be born on Earth." His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I will never forget. I cannot forget." Karen nodded slowly. "As a doctor, I believe in healing. But some wounds cannot heal until justice has been served. Those 8 billion people deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be avenged." Samuel was a gentle man who preferred plants to people, but even he could not ignore what had been done. "The Valdrix will do this again. They will find other species reaching for the stars and destroy them just as casually. If we do nothing, how many more worlds will burn?" Marcus was the last to speak. He had been a soldier his whole adult life, trained to protect humanity from threats. He had failed in the ultimate sense, but perhaps it was not too late to make things right. "We're 12,000 people," he said. "The Valdrics rule 40,000 star systems. They have millions of warships and billions of soldiers. If we are going to do this, it will take generations. It might take thousands of years. Our grandchildren's grandchildren might not live to see the end of it." "I know," Lisa said. "But we have something the Valdrics do not have. We have a reason to fight that goes beyond conquest or profit. We have memory. We have purpose. And we have time." The vote was unanimous. Every member of the council chose to remember. They named their new world Remembrance. In the years that followed, they built a civilization dedicated to a single goal. Every child learned the history of Earth. Every adult trained for the conflict that would one day come. They studied the Valdrics, learning their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses, and they waited. Lisa Grant lived to be 97 years old. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. By then, Remembrance had a population of nearly 100,000, and they had begun sending secret expeditions to other star systems. Her last words were spoken to her eldest grandson, a young man named Nathan, who had her same steady eyes. "Never forget," she told him. "Never forgive, and never let them see you coming." Nathan held her hand as she passed, and he carried her words with him for the rest of his life. He would pass them to his own children, and they would pass them to theirs. The chain of memory would remain unbroken for 500,000 years. The Valdrics had made a terrible mistake. They had thought humanity was insignificant. They had thought the destruction of Earth was the end of the story. They were wrong. It was only the beginning. The first explosions lit up the sky over Valdrix Prime like a second sunrise. Citizens who had never known fear in their lives stopped in the streets and looked upward, unable to understand what they were seeing. Their orbital defense platforms, the mightiest military installations in the galaxy, were burning. High Sovereign Kethvarn was in his private chambers when the attack began. The floor shook beneath his feet, and alarms he had never heard before began to wail throughout the palace. He called for his guards, his generals, anyone who could explain what was happening. "We are under attack, Your Excellency," a pale-faced officer reported. "Ships of unknown design have emerged throughout our space. They are destroying our defensive installations with weapons we have never encountered." Kethvarn stared at him in disbelief. "Unknown design? That is impossible. We have cataloged every species in the galaxy. There is no one left to challenge us. These ships match no known configuration. Their weapons bypass our shields entirely. Our fleet is taking heavy losses." On the bridge of the Inheritance, Nathan Cole watched the battle unfold across dozens of tactical displays. The Valdrics were fighting back with everything they had, but they were losing badly. Their ships were powerful but slow, designed for overwhelming force rather than speed and precision. Human vessels danced around them, striking at weak points and withdrawing before the Valdrics could respond. "Enemy flagship is trying to rally their formation," Amy Turner reported. "Should we intercept?" Nathan shook his head. "Let them rally. Let them think they have a chance. Then crush them." He had studied Valdric's tactics for his entire career. They were aggressive and direct, accustomed to enemies who broke and ran at the first sign of resistance. They had never faced an opponent who could match their firepower while outmaneuvering the mat. Every turn. The battle for Valdrix Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Valdrix defensive fleet had been reduced to scattered debris. Human ships controlled the orbital space around the homeworld, and marine transports were descending toward the surface. Nathan transported down with the first wave of soldiers. He wore powered combat armor that made him nearly invulnerable to Valdric's small arms. But he came not as a conqueror, but as a witness. There was something he needed to see. The capital city of the Valdrics was a monument to their empire. Towers built from metals harvested from conquered worlds rose miles into the sky. Statues of ancient warlords lined the processional ways. Everywhere there were symbols of Valdric supremacy, reminders that this species had dominated the galaxy for 5 million years. At the center of the city stood the Hall of Trophies. This was where the Valdrics displayed artifacts from every civilization they had destroyed, every species they had eliminated, every world they had burned. It was their greatest source of pride, a celebration of conquest and extinction. Nathan walked through the halls in silence. Around him, glass cases held the last remnants of murdered peoples. There were books in languages no one could read anymore. There were religious objects from gods no one remembered. There were children's toys from species that no longer existed. And then he found it. A small display case near the back of the hall, easy to miss if you were not looking for it. Inside was a holographic recreation of a blue planet, spinning slowly on its axis. The placard beneath it read, Sol 3, Primitive Bipeds. Eliminated before achieving significance. Nathan stood before the case for a long time. He thought about his ancestors, about Lisa Grant and Marcus Cole, and all the others who had made the choice to remember. He thought about the generations who had lived and died carrying the weight of that memory, never knowing if their descendants would see justice done. "Commander," Amy's voice came through his communicator. "We have captured the High Sovereign. He's being brought to the Central Plaza." "I will meet you there," Nathan replied. He reached out and touched the case gently. The holographic earth flickered under his fingers, a ghost of a world that had been dead for 500,000 years. "We came back," he whispered. "It took us a long time, but we came back." Kethvarn was on his knees when Nathan arrived at the plaza. The High Sovereign's fine robes were torn and dirty, and there was blood on his face from a cut above his eye. He was surrounded by human soldiers, their weapons trained on him from every direction. Nathan approached slowly, removing his helmet so that the Valdrics could see his face. Kethvarn looked up at him with a mixture of confusion and hatred. "What are you?" the High Sovereign demanded. "Where do you come from?" Nathan crouched down so that he was eye level with his enemy. 500,000 years ago, your ancestors destroyed a small planet called Earth. They killed 8 billion people because they thought humans might one day become a threat. They recorded it in their archives and forgot about it. Kethvarn's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The primitive bipeds. From Sol 3. "We were not primitive," Nathan said quietly. "We were young. There's a difference. And you should have made sure you killed all of us. This is impossible. We eliminated your entire species. You missed a ship. 12,000 survivors. They settled a new world and made a choice to remember what had been done to them. Every generation since then has carried that memory. Every child has learned the story of Earth, and for 500,000 years, we have been preparing for this day." Kethvarn laughed bitterly. "So you have come to destroy us as we destroyed you. The cycle continues." Nathan stood up and looked around at the ruined capital, at the burning towers and the cracked statues. He thought about all the species the Valdrics had destroyed, all the civilizations that had been erased before they could reach their potential. He thought about what humanity could become if they chose to follow the same path. "No," he said. "We are not going to destroy you. That would make us no different from what you are." Kethvarn stared at him in disbelief. "Then, what do you want?" "Justice," Nathan replied. "You will answer for your crimes. Your empire will be dismantled. The species you have enslaved will be freed. And you will spend the rest of your life knowing that the primitive bipeds you dismissed as insignificant brought down everything your people built over 5 million years." He turned to his soldiers. "Take him away. And be careful with him. He has a lot of questions to answer, and it would be a shame if he died before he could answer them." As Kethvarn was led away, Nathan looked up at the alien sky. Somewhere out there, in the space where Earth had once existed, there was nothing but empty void. But the children of Earth had survived. They had remembered. And they had proven that some things are worth fighting for, even if it takes 500,000 years. The war was not over, but the hardest part was done. The Valdric's dominion had been broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The war lasted 3 years. It was the bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever seen, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Valdrics fought with the desperation of a wounded animal, but they had been caught completely by surprise. Their greatest weapons had been destroyed in the opening hours of the conflict. Their communication networks had been sabotaged from within. Their slave races had risen up against them across 1,000 worlds. Admiral Nathan Cole directed the campaign from the bridge of the Inheritance. He slept only a few hours each night, spending the rest of his time studying reports, adjusting strategies, and making decisions that affected billions of lives. The weight of responsibility never left him, but he carried it without complaint. This was what his family had been preparing for since the beginning. Amy Turner remained at his side throughout the conflict. She had proven herself in battle 100 times over, leading attacks that turned the tide on critical fronts. More importantly, she understood the larger purpose behind their fight. They were not waging war for conquest or revenge. They were fighting to create a galaxy where no species would ever face what humanity had faced. The Valdric's Third Fleet has surrendered, Amy reported one morning. That leaves only their home defense forces still fighting. Nathan studied the tactical display. The Valdrics were cornered, their empire reduced to a handful of systems around their homeworld. They could continue fighting for months, perhaps even years, but the outcome was certain. The question now was how many more would die before they accepted their defeat. "Open a channel to their command structure," Nathan ordered. "I want to speak with whoever is leading their resistance." A few minutes later, a Valdric's face appeared on the main screen. It was Fleet Admiral Korthvar, one of the highest-ranking military officers who had avoided capture during the initial attack. He looked exhausted, his metallic skin dull and his 4 eyes bloodshot. "Human Commander," Korthvar said, "have you called to demand our surrender?" "I have called to offer you a choice," Nathan replied. "You can continue fighting and watch your people die for nothing. Or you can surrender now and preserve what remains of your civilization." Korthvar was silent for a long moment. "If we surrender, will you destroy our worlds as we destroyed yours?" "No." Nathan's voice was firm. "We are not you. We did not come here to commit genocide. We came to hold you accountable for your crimes and to free the species you have enslaved. When that is done, your people will be allowed to live." "Why?" The question seemed to pain the Valdric's admiral. "We killed your entire world. We would have killed all of you if we had known you existed. Why would you show us mercy?" Nathan thought about his answer carefully. It was a question humanity had debated for generations, knowing that one day they would have to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to be. "Because mercy is what separates justice from revenge," he said finally. "We remember what was done to us. We will never forget it. But we refuse to become what we hate." The Valdrics ruled through fear and destruction for 5 million years. And in the end, it brought you nothing but enemies. We choose a different path. Korthvar closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed in his expression. The defiance was gone, replaced by something that might have been acceptance. "We surrender," he said quietly. "What happens now?" The terms of the surrender were harsh, but fair. The Valdric's military was completely disbanded. Their fleet was confiscated or destroyed. The planet killers that remained were dismantled piece by piece. Their components shattered across the void where they could never be reassembled. The slave races were freed. For the first time in millions of years, the Rethki and the Javarn and dozens of other species could govern themselves. Human advisors helped them establish new governments, but they did not try to control them. The goal was freedom, not a new form of empire. Kethvarn was brought to trial before a council that included representatives from every species the Valdrix had wronged. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy so that everyone could see justice being done. The evidence against him was overwhelming, documenting millions of years of conquest, enslavement, and extermination. Nathan attended the trial as a witness. He sat in the gallery and watched as the High Sovereign faced the consequences of his species' actions. Kethvarn tried to defend himself, arguing that the Valdrix had only done what any dominant species would do. They had protected themselves from potential threats. They had ensured their survival. 8 billion people lived on Earth, Nathan said when it was his turn to speak. They had families and dreams and hopes for the future. They had children who would never grow up and old people who would never see their grandchildren. They were painters and scientists and farmers and teachers. They were everything that makes life worth living. He looked directly at Kethvarn. Your ancestors looked at all of that and decided it was insignificant. They killed an entire world because they were afraid of what we might become. But here's the truth you never understood. The real threat was never our technology or our military potential. It was our ability to remember, to pass down stories across generations, to hold on to hope when everything seemed lost. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment, not execution. Kethvarn would spend the rest of his days on a small moon, watched over by guards from a dozen different species. A living reminder of what happened to those who tried to rule the galaxy through fear. After the trial, Amy found Nathan standing on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The Valdrix world was at peace now, its citizens adjusting to a future without empire. It would take generations for them to accept what had happened, but the process had begun. How do you feel? Amy asked. Nathan considered the question. I am not sure. I spent my entire life preparing for this. My family spent 10,000 generations preparing for this. And now it is done. Is it what you expected? No. He shook his head slowly. I expected to feel satisfied. I expected to feel like justice had been served. Instead, I just feel tired. Amy stood beside him in silence for a while. What do we do now? Nathan looked out at the alien city, at the strange architecture and unfamiliar stars. For 500,000 years, humanity had been defined by a single purpose. Now that purpose had been fulfilled. They had to decide what they wanted to become. We build something new, he said. Something better than what came before. The Valdrix ruled through fear and force, and look where it got them. We have a chance to show the galaxy a different way. Do you think we can do it? Nathan thought about Lisa Grant and the other survivors, making their choice on a strange new world 500,000 years ago. They had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. They had passed their hope down through countless generations until it finally bore fruit. We survived the destruction of our homeworld, he said. We built a civilization in secret while surrounded by enemies. We defeated the most powerful empire the galaxy has ever known. After all that, how hard can building a better future be? Amy smiled for the first time in weeks. When you put it that way, it sounds almost easy. It will not be easy, Nathan admitted. But it will be worth it. That is all we can ever ask for. They stood together on the balcony, watching the sun set over a world that was learning to be free. The war was over. The hard work of peace was just beginning. 20 years had passed since the end of the war. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible a generation ago. The old Valdrix dominion was gone, replaced by a loose federation of free species who governed themselves according to their own traditions. Human advisors helped where they were wanted, that they never tried to control. They had learned from the mistakes of those who came before. Admiral Nathan Cole had retired to a small house on Remembrance, the world where humanity had begun its long journey toward justice. He was old now, his hair white and his movements slower than they once were. But his eyes still held the same steady calm that had guided him through the darkest days of the war. He spent his mornings tending a small garden behind his house. It was simple work, far removed from the life-and-death decisions he had once made, but he found peace in it. There was something satisfying about helping things grow, about nurturing life instead of taking it. Fleet Admiral Amy Turner came to visit him on the anniversary of Earth's destruction. It was a day of remembrance throughout human space, a time when people gathered to honor those who had been lost and to celebrate how far they had come. Schools closed so that children could hear the stories. Workers took time off to visit memorials. Even after 500,000 years, the memory of Earth remained strong. Amy had aged well. Her hair was gray now, and there were lines around her eyes, but she still carried herself with the confidence of a soldier. She had taken command of the fleet after Nathan's retirement and had guided humanity through the difficult transition from war to peace. "You look good," she said as she sat down on his porch. "Retirement agrees with you." Nathan smiled. "I never thought I would enjoy it. My whole life was about the mission. I did not know what I would do when it was over. And now?" He gestured at his garden, at the vegetables and flowers growing in neat rows. "Now I plant things and watch them grow. It is a strange feeling, having a future that is not defined by war." Amy nodded. She understood. Their generation had been raised to fight. Learning to live in peace had been almost as difficult as winning the war in the first place. "I have news from the Galactic Council," she said. "The Valdrics have petitioned for restored trading rights. Some of the member species think we should consider it." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "What do you think?" "I think they have suffered enough. Their empire is gone. Their military is disbanded. They have spent 20 years living with the consequences of what they did. At some point, we have to decide whether we want permanent enemies or eventual partners." Nathan was quiet for a while, watching a bird that had landed in his garden. It was a species native to Remembrance, with bright blue feathers and a cheerful song. The early colonists had brought Earth animals with them, but most had died out over the generations. This world had its own life now. "When I was young," he said finally, "I thought justice meant punishment. I thought we had to make the Valdrics pay for what they did, that we had to hurt them as badly as they hurt us. But the older I get, the more I think justice is about something else." "What is that?" "Creating a universe where what happened to Earth can never happen again. The Valdrics destroyed us because they were afraid of what we might become. They thought the only way to be safe was to eliminate any potential threat. And look where that got them." He turned to face Amy directly. "If we treat them as permanent enemies, if we keep them isolated and afraid forever, then we are just repeating the same cycle. We have to be better than that. We have to show that there is another way." Amy smiled. "That is what I thought you would say. I am going to recommend to the council that we begin negotiations." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. It was a different sun than the one that had warmed Earth, but it gave the same light, nurtured the same life. In the end, perhaps that was all that mattered. "Do you ever wonder what Earth was like?" Amy asked. "The real Earth, I mean. Not the stories and the histories, but the actual place." Nathan nodded slowly. "All the time. I have seen the recordings, studied the images, read the descriptions. But I know it is not the same as being there. 8 billion people lived on that world, and each one of them experienced it differently. All of that is lost now. Is that why you built the garden?" He looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Growing things. Creating life. It is a way of honoring what was lost, is it not? Earth was a living world, full of plants and animals and ecosystems that took billions of years to develop. When the Valdrix destroyed it, they did not just kill people. They killed an entire biosphere. Nathan had never thought of it that way, but she was right. His garden was a small act of creation in a universe that had seen too much destruction. It was his way of saying that life goes on, that beauty can exist even in the shadow of tragedy. In the Sol system, where Earth used to be, there is a memorial station now, he said. I visited it once, a long time ago. There is nothing there except empty space and a structure built to remember. 8 billion names are carved into the walls. It would take a lifetime to read them all. I have never been there. You should go. Not because it is sad, though it is. You should go because it reminds you why we fought. Not for revenge. Not for conquest. We fought so that the names on those walls would not be forgotten. We fought so that their deaths would have meaning. Amy reached over and took his hand. They would be proud of us, I think. The people who died on Earth. They would be proud of what we became. I hope so, Nathan said softly. I hope we honored their memory. That evening, as the stars came out over Remembrance, Nathan stood in his garden and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, scattered across 100 worlds, the children of Earth were building new lives. They were farmers and scientists, artists and engineers. They were falling in love and raising families and dreaming about the future. They had survived the worst thing that could happen to a species. They had carried their grief and their anger across 500,000 years, but they had not let it destroy them. Instead, they had transformed it into something powerful. They had become protectors instead of conquerors, builders instead of destroyers. The Valdrix had been wrong about humans. They had thought that humanity was insignificant, that they could be erased without consequence. But humans had proven that significance is not about power or technology. It is about the will to survive, the capacity to hope, and the determination to remember. Nathan thought about Lisa Grant, standing on the observation deck of the Wanderer's Hope, making the choice that would define humanity for 500,000 years. He thought about all the generations that had come after her, each one passing the torch to the next. He thought about his own children and grandchildren, who would carry the story forward into a future he would never see. The stars shone down on him, countless and eternal. Among them were worlds where new species were just beginning to reach for the sky. Some of them might succeed. Some of them might fail. But whatever happened, they would not face the galaxy alone. Humanity would be watching. Humanity would remember. And if anyone ever tried to destroy another innocent world, humanity would be there to stop them. That was the legacy of Earth. That was the promise the survivors had made to the dead. And it was a promise that would never be broken. Nathan smiled and went inside. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do in the garden. There was always more work to do. But for now, the night was peaceful, the stars were bright, and the children of Earth were finally home.